they're talking about loneliness,
Loneliness.
as the greatest health threat.
Yeah.
How a lonely person has more heart damage from their loneliness than somebody who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day.
Please don't tell me that. That's heartbreaking to hear.
We are made for social connection.
Yeah.
We are profoundly made for social connection. That's what each of these neuroscientists discovers.
I really want to come back to grief in the workplace. And I think in studying with you and in learning from you, I came to this realization in one moment that burnout actually stems from unmourned grief.
Yes. And the more that our leaders can model for us, and the more that our co-workers also have integrated grief, where they're going, dang, I'm sad about this, and then keeping going, because that's resilience, is like stopping to nod, take account of, acknowledge what's true, and then moving forward with the best possible way forward.
Yeah.
I'm Sarah Peyton, and my definition of belonging is when you know that what you have to say is not just going to be allowed, but it actually is wanted.
We are back. We are back for episode 2. We are continuing the conversation. In the last episode that you and I met and chatted, we talked about many, 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 many things. But where we left off was the circuits.
Yes.
And that's where I'd love to go with you today and to continue this conversation. Because now I want to really dive into workplace behavior.
Okay.
And organizations, and to really support workforces in creating resonant culture. You know, we talk about creating cultures of belonging, but for me, creating cultures of belonging is creating resonant culture. In fact, I'm offering a new course called Building Resonance in Times of Crisis, which you have so graciously offered to support and co-create and co-design with me in level 2. And co-facilitate, which is going to be amazing. So bringing us back to Jaak Panksepp's work in affective neuroscience and his body of research, which is the circuits of emotion and motivation. We talked about all of the different circuits last time. We talked about the seeking circuit, which is on the left hemisphere or in the left hemisphere. And then we moved over to the right hemisphere and we talked about all of the emotionality. You know, the disgust circuit, the fear, rage, panic, grief, care, play, sexuality. So what I'd love to do now is do a deeper dive into each of the circuits, starting with the left, the seeking circuit, which is our motivational circuit. It's where performance is, where engagement is, right?
Absolutely.
And then start to go through and tie in all of the wonderful things about each of the circuits.
The seeking circuit is largely the left hemisphere. There are some things that show up on the right. So it's not that, oversimplification of 100% here and 100% there. But it's run by dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
And it is our get things done. It's our delivery circuit, productivity. It's the foundation of everything else. Everything needs seeking for any movement to happen. So if we're afraid, we need seeking to be helping us to get the heck out of there. If we're angry, we need seeking to be helping us move with our expression of love and rage.
Mm-hmm.
If we're in panic grief, we need seeking to help us integrate and move and mourn. So seeking is like the thing that gives everything else motion.
If Gallup says that 68% of the workforce is disengaged.
Yes.
If McKinsey says something very similar.
Yes.
Engagement happens in the seeking circuit.
Well, I would say that engagement is a full 100% all circuit activity.
Wow.
Yes. Because everything else gives seeking meaning. And we can't have engagement without meaning. I mean, that's what's missing.
So this is when my contribution matters.
Yes.
This is when I'm being appreciated for my contribution.
Yes, and you can see its results, yes.
This is when I'm able to receive feedback and reflect.
Yes.
This is when I'm able to hold boundaries and set limitations.
As long as they're meaningful, yes. In the service of, yes.
Yeah, wow. This is when I'm able to show empathy. This is where I'm able to be resonant.
This is where we get to integrate resonance into the workplace, because that's what brings all the circuits to life, and that's what gives us full engagement workforces.
So I'm going to hopefully not too much dampen your enthusiasm right now. So sorry. I remember you talking about depression.
Yes.
And this was a long time ago. I think one of your very early webinars that I attended, where I remember you saying that depression occurs when the seeking circuit is blocked.
It does, but we just had Douglas Watt come on and work for us 2 years ago and do an amazing talk about depression and the work of Jaak Panksepp. Douglas Watt was Jaak Panksepp's major co-researcher and fellow writer. So he's a living voice in the world of affective neuroscience, which is magical to have Jaak Panksepp's work and thought being continued into the present time.
Yeah.
And what he said about depression adds an element to our understanding, to what I had those many years ago. So I'll see if I can describe this very quickly. Depression, he says, is the collapse state that comes after we have had so much alarmed aloneness that we move into metabolic exhaustion.
Oh my God.
And metabolic exhaustion from alarmed aloneness will kill us. So we need to stop the metabolic exhaustion from alarmed aloneness. So we switch into this other state, which is a depression state, which is actually saving us from the death from alarmed aloneness and metabolic exhaustion. So, and if we put the seeking in there, it's like we're seeking for connection, for care, for relationship, for meaning, for engagement. It's not happening. It's blocked. So it's both things together. And those many years ago, I didn't have that full picture with the integration of the panic grief.
I mean, this just opens up so much.
Yes.
This is why I love talking to you. I'm completely deviating, going down a tangent here.
Sure.
Learned helplessness.
Well, learned helplessness is the collapse state that's saving us from metabolic exhaustion.
The contingency, the number one contingency for learned helplessness, according to Martin Seligman, is uncontrollability.
Yeah.
The path out of learned helplessness is, in fact, controllability.
You know, in some of the animal research, it also seems to be agency. Like, this may be exactly what Martin Seligman is saying, but there's something about disconnecting the sense that everything is hopeless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the definition of hope is a combination of willpower and way power. Willpower, to your point, is exactly that, agency, which I'm going to tie back to the rage circuit and the power chakra. I'm getting very emotional. And way power is the pathways to the goal. So I have the agency and I see a path forward. This is the collective definition of hope. Right. When I'm in this collapsed state, how do I start to access agency? How do I start to access and be able to see my path forward? Where's my way power? Where's my willpower?
You know, I often think about this, and my sense of the movement out of that collapsed state is very similar to what Judith Herman writes about trauma. She writes that one of the contributors to experiences of trauma is a sense of helplessness. And that what she finds when she researches different trauma survivors of the same trauma is that the ones for whom grace gave them a sense that taking action was possible end up with much less PTSD than the ones who didn't have that happen. So an incredible example of this is something that you here in California may still remember, though it happened when I was a child, I think. It was the time when the bus full of children was kidnapped and driven into a mountain. Do you remember that one?
Oh, was there a movie made of this?
There probably was. She says that there was one boy in the back whose window was partially open, and some crumbs of dirt fell on him from the window. And those crumbs of dirt gave him the idea that maybe they could open the window and shovel dirt into the bus and begin to create a possible escape route. And indeed, that's what they did. And he was the child who ended up with the least amount of trauma. And it happened not because he was more morally upstanding or more resilient or stronger. It happened because of grace, because he was hit by this dirt, and it gave him the idea. So there is...
When you say grace, are you talking about like fortuitousness?
Yeah. So if we think about that in the collapse state, that something finds its way through. I once read a wonderful book by a woman who discovered that vacuuming made her feel better when she was depressed, that she got this marvelous vacuum, and when she vacuumed, she could turn the dirt out of the vacuum. It was like her sense of agency was reawakened just by this fortuitous vacuum discovery. And so she comes to mind for me as well. And there's a double thing that has to happen, I think, for recovery from depression. Part of it is being awakened to possibility. And it can be taking a class like our classes, where people go, oh,
exactly.
I'm in a collapse state because of metabolic exhaustion. And they can begin to even say to themselves and to their depression, thank you for saving me from death. Thank you. Thank you, system, which is very unusual. Because mostly people who are being depressed are told that they're supposed to be mean to themselves or yell at themselves or, but instead to say, oh, this is a saving place. This isn't a factor of me being weak or defective. This is a result of a level of alarmed aloneness that is so profound that I've ended up here. So that's like dirt falling on us, is the wonderful miracle of happening into Rajkumari Neogy's classes and going, oh, I make sense.
Yeah.
And then the next part is a little bit of remedy for the alarmed aloneness. A little bit of holding, a little bit of acknowledgement, a little bit of accompaniment in the truth of the alarmed aloneness. So that's what's most important with depression, is beginning to understand and catch a glimpse of the way that humans can be felled by what scientists call separation distress and what I call alarmed aloneness.
There is so much there. So let's slowly tease this apart here. So in Martin Seligman's book, he co-wrote this book with two other peers. I don't remember their names, and it's called The Theory of Learned Helplessness. There were three main neurochemical issues at play. I guess three potential routes into learned helplessness, which was a decrease in norepinephrine, or a decrease in endogenous benzodiazepine, or a decrease in endogenous opioids. So what was, of course, what you can only imagine happened for me was I went to the circuits immediately and tried to unpack that, right?
Right.
And that took me to, of course, the panic grief circuit,
yes,
which is profoundly relevant,
right?
Which is the endogenous opioids. It took me to the fear circuit,
yes,
which is the endogenous benzodiazepine,
yes,
right. So much of what we talk about when I talk about my course, Understanding Humans at Work, is that's where the psychological safety aspect happens. Amy Edmondson talks about psychological safety from her book, Fearless Organization. She's a Harvard professor. I like to dive into the science of things.
Yes.
You and I like to do that. And so really understanding the fear circuit is being driven when there's a lack of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And then where I got tripped up was norepinephrine, right? Because that I couldn't obviously pinpoint. But it took me to the reticular activating system in my own brain, the brainstem, where the majority of norepinephrine is secreted, manufactured and secreted. And it brought me to the seeking circuit. I made that leap.
Well, interestingly enough, we can find this in as we spoke about last time. We talked about Ian McGilchrist's investigation of the left and right hemisphere.
Yeah.
The major transmitter for the left hemisphere is dopamine. The major transmitter for the right hemisphere is norepinephrine, noradrenaline. And so part of what we're seeing then with learned helplessness is that the entire right hemisphere goes offline.
So where I was going, this is why I love talking to you, is when you said helplessness, I wrote down in capital letters and underscored it, unmet needs.
Yes.
We just talked about in the last episode how feelings and needs, come from the right hemisphere and all that circuitry that Jaak talks about.
Yeah.
So this brings us to grief in the workplace.
Yes.
And I want to stay with depression because when we think about mental health, depression is very relevant.
Yes.
And becoming more and more so. I think you did a presentation forever ago, but very much before COVID, where the World Health Organization at that time was saying that depression was the third cause of, how do they say that, disease?
Yeah.
About to become in 2008, was it 2008, 18? The second.
Yes.
And now, post-COVID, it has to be number one.
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, I don't know.
Loneliness. They're talking about loneliness. As the greatest health threat.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how a lonely person has more heart damage from their loneliness than somebody who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day.
Please don't tell me that. please don't tell me that. That's heartbreaking to hear. That's incredible.
It is. It is. We are. This comes back to the work that we were looking at before of James A. Cohen, that we are made for social connection.
Yeah.
We are profoundly made for social connection. That's what each of these neuroscientists discovers. As they do their work, they become more and more relational because they discover that what's most important is the social connection. And one of the beautiful things about James A. Cohen that we didn't get to mention last time is that he says, we have to admit, though, if humans have not been safe, then we're not made to feel better by their presence.
So this is beautiful. This is what Resma Menakem talks about, right?
Yes.
Resma Menakem talks about how bodies that are conditioned in violence actually see safety as a threat.
Right.
And he spends a lot of time working, through somatic abolitionism and really getting participants to, be embodied in states of embodiment.
Yeah.
And he says this particular phrase that just melts my heart every single time. And I've actually adapted it and just, pay him huge homage for this. He says, protective, not defective.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
It just gives depth and breadth and compassion to unconscious contracts.
Yes.
Right. So I want to circle back to this depression piece and really looking at, grief in the workplace.
Yes.
The panic grief circuit has a flavor of anxiety.
It is one of the root causes of anxiety.
And the fear circuit has...
It's the other root cause of anxiety.
That's why I'm bringing it up. So let's talk a little bit about, I hear about anxiety all the time.
Yeah.
I hear less about depression just because I'm sure there's a lot of, shame,
stigma
and stigma around that. Yeah. So, but let's dive into anxiety.
Okay. So we can kind of what Jaak Panksepp did with anxiety was he would give animals that were anxious different medicines to see if that would help them. So he would give them.
I love this.
He would give them opiates, and if they got better, then he was like, "Oh, their anxiety was panic grief anxiety. Was this panic grief of separation distress?" And then he would give them other animals benzodiazepines, and they would calm down. He said, "Oh, their anxiety is on the fear circuit." But if he gave the animals who were calmed by benzodiazepines opiates, they didn't calm. And if he gave the animals who were calmed by opiates benzodiazepines, they didn't calm, which is an interesting piece of information that people who are describing antidepressants often don't take into account, or anti-anxiety medication. So we can know that attachment actually plays a really interesting role when we begin to look at the circuits and how they function in humans. So, for example, if we are, there are three main types of organized attachment, and then there's disorganized attachment.
Yeah.
So we have secure attachment, which means, and the word attachment in this context is the prediction of how others will meet us. So if we're expecting that we're going to walk in the world and others will meet us with warmth and they'll be fairly predictable and pretty safe, then we have secure attachment. We often think about attachment as being an individual thing. It's just here, but it's actually in relationship with the world and with the people that we know and meet.
Right, because another kind of simplified way of looking at it is I'm either this or this or this type of attachment. But the reality is that it's situationally based.
Situationally based and nesting bowl-like. That we can be securely attached, but there can be an avoidant shell around that, and there can be an ambivalent shell around that, and there can be a little bit of disorganization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So whenever we take attachment tests, we actually usually see ourselves with different percentage points for each different kind of attachment. And each of them serve us. I mean, this comes back to Resmaa Menakem's statement of protective, not defective.
Yeah.
Our attachment styles are not defective. They are absolutely appropriate for the world that we've lived in and for what we have grown to expect based on very good historical evidence.
Yeah.
So a secure attachment, expecting folks to meet us and to be respectful and warm.
Yeah.
Avoidant attachment, expecting ourselves to have to be alone in the world. Nobody's going to help us. We can't count on anybody else. No one else is going to come when we're distressed. We need to take care of ourselves. Ambivalent attachment, then we're predicting that we need to join with other nervous systems and everybody needs to be okay for anybody to be okay. So we're predicting that joining must happen for okayness.
Wow.
Avoidant, we're predicting that joining must not happen for okayness.
Wow.
Ambivalent, joining must happen.
Wow.
Secure, in and out of joining. It's fine.
And disorganized?
Disorganized, unpredictable.
This is the best definition of attachment I've ever heard. This is genius.
So with the seeking circuit, if we start there,
yeah,
and we're thinking about like a fabulous flow of dopamine, that's what we want for the seeking circuit. We want a healthy, wonderful, replenishing, fuel of dopamine to be flowing when we're not wanting to sleep or rest or cuddle. We want to be like able to be active, able to mobilize, and for it to feel good. I was just looking at some research last week that was about exercising. And it turns out that those days when you feel like your exercising was crap are the days when the dopamine wasn't flowing. And the days when you're like, yeah, that was a good workout. Those are dopamine days. Yeah. So dopamine is very essential for our well-being.
Very attractive.
And so a securely attached seeking system is both highly energized. Now, you may remember Daniel Siegel and his acronym FACES: flexible, adaptable, coherent, energized, and stable for secure attachment, for integration. So here we have energized. Yes, what a wonderful thing. And flexible. Oh my goodness. This means that the seeking circuit is not out. You'll remember from the last time Rajkumari and I were together, driving the car without ever being able to turn around. No, that's not flexible. That's inflexible.
Right.
That's avoidant attachment. That's a seeking circuit without everybody else helping it. So it's almost like the seeking circuit gets to be securely attached when it knows that all the other circuits will help it. Just like a person gets to be securely attached when we believe that others will be responsive to us.
Yeah.
So secure attachment is always the highest form of integration of all of the circuits. And then as we come off secure attachment, we start to slip into, if we go into avoidant attachment with the seeking circuit, we're just running on dopamine. We start to lose meaning. The farther we go away from security into avoidant attachment, the more we're just marching along as little foot soldiers, trying to get things done. Not a lot of meaning, getting the paycheck, counting the minutes. Oh my God, it's, 40 minutes until lunch break. That's a foot soldier. And as we come farther over for the seeking circuit over into ambivalent attachment, what we begin then to see is all of the difficulties with focus that people run up against. So the distractions, the ADHD, the movements out of effectiveness, the dithering, the inability to decide, the inability to make decisions. Because the seeking circuit is then looking for relationship, but if it's not connected to the other circuits, it can't find it. It can't find relationship. The more that we move away from security, from the integration with all the circuits, into the unsuccessful search for another nervous system that will stabilize us.
And join.
Yeah. The less effective we are and the less productive we are.
Wow.
So as we move with seeking away from security to the left, into the left hemisphere, into avoidant attachment, we're moving away from meaning. As we move on the right, we're moving away from productivity and focus.
And when you say left and right, are you talking about you're talking about the hemisphere?
I'm talking about the hemispheres, and I'm also talking about kind of
this meter.
Yeah, like a drawing of secure attachment, avoidant attachment, ambivalent attachment.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And in that moving into the right hemisphere for anxious attachment or ambivalent attachment, I'm hyper vigilant in trying to find a circuit that I can connect to.
Yeah, or a person. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're raging, I'll take that over being alone.
Oh yeah.
If you're fearful, I'll try to actually join you and care for you,
or be afraid with you.
Yeah. If you're in panic grief mode, then I'll just mourn with you or
But collapse with you.
Collapse with you.
Yeah.
I feel like these these conversations are like mini YouTube sessions in neuroscience. I mean, they are, but it's just mind blowing. And then disorganized.
And then disorganized. So disorganized seeking can come back into relationship with each of the other circuits and make it really toxic. So,
what would be an example of something like
disorganized seeking connected with rage, unpredictable rageaholism,
tantrums.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Seeking connected with unpredictable fear, unpredictable panic attacks.
The roof is falling.
Yeah.
The roof is falling.
Yeah.
What about disorganized seeking with panic grief?
That's actually what it turns out panic attacks are. I used the word panic attacks last time, but the roof is falling is much better for that. The panic attacks actually are mostly resolved by opiates, which means that they're separation distress.
Yeah.
So panic attacks are on that progression downward into metabolic exhaustion that we were talking about in connection with depression.
You know, I run these biology of belonging boot camps, as you know so well, and I run them at different organizations, and I was just running them. We just had a session last week because they're 12 weeks long, and several weeks ago, one of the participants so we have content for about 20 minutes, and then we go into a small group discussion for 20 minutes, and then we come back and debrief as a large group. One of the persons stayed in the main room with me, and I just, went and got coffee and whatever. But when I came back, this participant asked permission to go and take a break.
Oh no!
Because they felt collapsed.
Oh.
And they started to find that they were alone when I left to go get coffee.
Wow.
This person asked permission to take care of themselves when I got back from getting my coffee, because they started to have a panic attack that they felt all alone.
Oh.
So their disorganized seeking was in this place of separation anxiety, because I had left and everyone went off into small groups.
Yes.
And they were all by themselves in the main room, and they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
This is an adult executive in a workplace organization who is getting a paycheck, has a family, is a mom, who had a panic attack because people went out into breakout rooms.
Yeah.
And I went to go get coffee.
Yeah. And your teaching then allows people to begin to see themselves in this and find themselves in this, and to be able to name a little bit of these terrifying and somewhat horrifying and often shameful experiences of being impacted exactly by belonging.
Daniel Siegel, if I recall correctly, talks about the definition of a relationship, which is to know and to be known.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much.
It's so beautiful. And indeed, the foundation stone of disorganized attachment, which is shown by the research of Beatrice Beebe, shows that the foundation stone of disorganized attachment is not being known and not having a sense that being known is possible. What she found with her work with infants and mothers up to the age of 4 months was that she's done 40 years of research, and she's tracked the way that mothers and babies interact with one another in a 3-minute period. And then she correlates that to later development of attachment style, because the regular measurement of attachment style is the infant strange situation, which only takes place once an infant is 1 year old. So there haven't been markers before now of pre-1-year-old attachment styles. But Beatrice Beebe can see this in just one 3-minute interaction between a mom and a baby.
Of what the attachment style is going to, the prediction of...
Yes, she can predict, like with 87% accuracy, what the attachment style is going to be. And
Sorry,
it's stunning, isn't it? And
that's completely stunning.
And remember what I discovered in episode number 1 that we did together, which was that even though what happens before the age of 3 is really important, it does not set us in stone.
Yes.
We are neuroplastic. We can change. We can grow. We can heal. We can move towards earned, secure attachment.
Yes.
Instead of having to be disorganized or avoidant or ambivalent.
So what's coming up for me besides anger, frustration, and despair?
And before you go there, I just want to say we need to come back to Beatrice Beebe and that foundation stone because I haven't said what it is yet.
What's the foundation stone?
The foundations. Then we'll come back to your despair.
Thank you.
The foundation stone is that the baby looks sad or distressed and the mom looks surprised.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
But this is not...
Or the mom smiles.
So the baby doesn't get to be known.
Right. And can't predict that they would ever be possible for them to be known.
But, okay, this was my point.
Now we come to your despair.
Yes, which is this then takes us down the path to anxiety.
Yes.
Depression.
Yes.
Hopelessness.
Yes.
Learned helplessness.
Yes. It does.
And then...
It does.
Trauma.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then toxic workplace behavior.
Yes, it's true.
And then what we'll cover in the 3rd episode. I'm feeling... So do you have... I have my own antidote for despair. Do you have an antidote for despair?
I'd love to hear your antidote for despair first.
Hope.
Hope is your antidote for despair.
Yeah. So Archbishop Desmond Tutu asks he was asked such a beautiful question. He was asked, what do you do in times of despair? And his response was, you show your dignity.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And, for me, it's about hope. Is hope a panic grief experience?
Hope is foundational for human well-being. But I like to come back to Ian McGilchrist.
Yeah.
I love what Ian McGilchrist says about hope and about optimism. He says, optimism is a left hemisphere experience. Pessimism is a right hemisphere experience. The left hemisphere is unrealistic. The right hemisphere is realistic. He says, depression is the only thing that actually makes sense in terms of what's really happening in the world. But we need hope. We need optimism in order to survive, in order to have well-being. We need it. He says, so I define myself as a skeptical optimist.
That is hilarious.
Yes. I think this goes in the direction of gallows humor.
At 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this takes us to heartbreak.
It does.
This takes us to heartbreak.
And surviving heartbreak and being accompanied in heartbreak. And back to our wonderful inside out skit. Yes.
I love that we read each other's minds in such a sweet way. Joy is ridiculously optimistic.
Indeed.
To the point where it's irritating.
Yes, just like Tigger.
And someone in class asked me once if that was toxic positivity. And I said no, that it wasn't yet, because it wasn't discounting someone's reality. It was just trying to get her needs met, right? So she wasn't dismissing him or basically gaslighting. And what's your definition of gaslighting, Sarah, by the way?
Oh, well, my definition of gaslighting is when somebody who has more power than somebody else tells the person that they have more power than that they have made a mistake in how they feel and what they perceive.
Why the distinction of power?
Because if my son, if I'm a mom and I have a 5-year-old son and my 5-year-old son says, "Mom, you're wrong. You're overreacting."
It'll obviously make you giggle.
Then you'd probably laugh, right? Yeah. Or else you'd go, oh, he's been listening to somebody else, because this is not something a 5-year-old would say. Or if you're a boss and an employee says to you, no, you heard that wrong. That's very unlikely. Right? I mean, it can happen, but it's very unlikely that the employee will tell the employer that they're remembering things incorrectly, unless they've got some sort of video or something. And even then, they'd be rocking the boat pretty intensely.
Well, I'm still confused about the power dynamic because, so let's say that you say, wow, it's really hot in here in the studio, which it is. Let's be clear, given what I'm wearing. My whole need to be this fashionista thing is just not working in the summertime in Marin. Let's be clear. Let's say that you say that it's really hot in the studio, and I'm actually freezing cold, and I say, no, it's not. What's wrong with you?
Well, you have more power because you're the host.
Okay, let's say we're at a park bench. And same thing happens.
But we don't know each other.
We know each other.
We know each other.
Yeah, we're having we're having our cucumber sandwiches. On a park bench.
And I say, it's so hot. And you say, it's so cold. I'm freezing.
No, I say, no, it's not. It's freezing cold here.
It's freezing cold here. No, it's not. It's freezing cold here. So I'm trying to imagine Sarah and Rajkumari on the park bench.
This would never happen. So this is why you're struggling. My point is that I define gaslighting as dismissing, discounting, and denying someone's reality.
Yes.
You concur?
Yes, but I add the power piece.
So that was really helpful because I'm laughing because when I talk about gaslighting in my courses, there's some very interesting pushback in terms of how I'm defining it and what Wikipedia is defining it. Oh. And there's always this element of manipulation that comes into play in the pushback. And the reality is that, anytime you're dismissing or denying or discounting, that is a form of manipulation, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
And I have actually vetted this with my dear friend LaFawn Davis, who I've spoken to you about, who is, head of ESG over at Indeed, who agrees with my definition. So that in and of itself makes it right.
Yes.
But talking about gaslighting, and thank you for validating that, brings me back to, I really want to come back to grief in the workplace. I think this is such an important piece. And I think in studying with you and in learning from you, I came to this realization in one moment because of some particular things that you said around grief and effectiveness in the workplace, that burnout actually stems from, and you've already alluded to this multiple times, unmourned grief.
Yes. Yes.
That overwhelm.
Yes.
Is unmourned grief.
Yes. I have some more to say about overwhelm. Very interesting thoughts about overwhelm. But
Please.
Before we go there, we'll stay with grief because we've referenced it a couple of times and bring it into this picture of attachment, because it's also very interestingly impacted by what is our attachment style. When we have secure attachment, remember, secure attachment is where you're expecting to find partnership in the world. When we have secure attachment, we're going to carry within us an experience of partnership that allows us to live in a constant state of mourning what is the gap between what we wish were true and what's actually true.
Wait, say that again, please.
Yes. When we have secure attachment,
yes,
and we're connecting to panic grief, what happens is that we have an internalized sense of other. So that's what our prediction is, that others will be with us. We carry them with us in our brains. The carrying within our brains of an expectation of supported others makes my cortisol less.
Sure.
Makes my reactivity to stress less, makes my resilience greater. Mm-hmm. But part of the reason that I have more resiliency is because I have an internalized sense that I'm accompanied in the moments when what's happening is not what I wish were happening.
And let's underscore that accompaniment and presence are the met needs in the panic grief circuit.
They are so met. Yes. Yeah. So my ability to be with the world as it is, to say, oh, damn, climate crisis happening right now. Rajkumari is very hot. It is not supposed to be this temperature in Marin County in June, in the first days of July, right? This is being with reality as it is.
Yeah.
This takes me walking with myself to say, yes, the world is not as I wish it were. And that then lets me go. We spoke in our first episode about plan, do, check, adjust.
Yeah.
So checking and adjusting are right hemisphere capacities. They're the capacity to receive feedback without blaming. Mm-hmm. They're the capacity to integrate feedback without blaming. Mm-hmm. And so if, for example, I'm in my avoidant attachment with you about the heat, then I'll want to blame. That's what avoidant attachment does. Remember how when we were talking about the instrumental brain doesn't have the neurons to be able to integrate and mourn. So my avoidant attachment with grief takes me right into blame. Blame is the manifestation of avoidant grief. Then I would say...
I want to slow this down. Blame is the manifestation of avoidant grief.
Yes.
Can we all just take that in? Please continue.
Yes. So if I'm in my avoidant, then I would say, oh, the people who are running this studio, it's too hot. They don't have the air conditioning. That would be the avoidant grief.
Wow.
And then the ambivalent grief would be, oh my God, Rajkumari's too hot. There would be
the anxiety to go to Mike, my producer, and say, hey, Mike, you know what? How much money is it going to take to actually build an air conditioning unit in the next 20 minutes?
Yes, right? Exactly.
Because I can't have, Rajkumari or Sarah be uncomfortable in this way, and I want to make sure that I'm caring for solving for the discomfort of this experience so I can join with them in comfort.
So these manifest in the workplace.
Wow.
Blame manifests in the workplace. Anxiety and ineffective problem solving manifests in the workplace.
Yeah.
And the more that our leaders can model for us, and the more that our coworkers also have integrated grief, where they're going, dang, I'm sad about this, and then keeping going, because that's resilience, is like stopping to nod, take account of, acknowledge what's true, and then moving forward with the best possible way forward.
Yeah. Our brains are wired to belong and to form relationships. The definition of a relationship is to know and be known. When I am able to mourn, then I am understanding what my workforce is experiencing. And when I can model that mourning to the workforce in whatever capacity, right? My communication, my all hands, a one-on-one, meetings, whatever it is.
Yes.
I am completely in relationship with them now.
Yes.
I am able to model an accompanied state of panic grief.
Yes.
And that moves me into creating safety.
Yes. And you had mentioned when we were driving about a particular experience that you had with a company that was doing downsizing.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to speak about that for a moment? I think this illustrates this so beautifully.
So I was working with a smaller company, under 1,000 people, and I was working with the C-suite team in preparation for the RIF, the following...
The reduction in force.
Thank you. The following week. And one of the things that I emphasized was, if we don't include resonant language, the right hemisphere, then your workforce is going to feel abandoned, is going to feel isolated and distrusting completely. So we went through a 2-hour activity. I ended up helping to, give my edits for resonant language in the copy that was all going to go out. And it was the best case scenario for a worst case situation. The compliments that the CEO received in delivering, there were tears, there was gratitude. It was very, very surprising for the C-suite team of how things unfolded in a very, very positive way.
Entire workplaces, everything about the workplace can be transformed with this material.
I mean, I can just speak personally. Coming from my background, you know so much of my history. There was a point where I had done so much personal work up until 2013, and I remember coming to a place of getting really confused because I had just stumbled across NVC, and I was like, what the hell is this?
What is nonviolent communication?
Exactly. What is nonviolent communication? What are feelings and needs? Like, what is this, right? I remember having to, they have those decks, those cards with feelings and needs. I remember, being partnered at the time and having to use the deck in every conversation that involved conflict, because I did not know what my feelings were and I did not know what my needs were. And I had to go through, and then I had to pick the first 5, and I would trim it down to 3, and then we would have a conversation. I mean, it was exhausting, and it took hours to do this.
Right.
But it saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
The ways in which I show up, people say, who know me now, that when I tell them stories of who I was 25 years ago, they don't believe me. They just don't believe me. They said, I used to be, a raging alcoholic to the point where I was blackout drinking. I used to be incredibly violent.
Wow.
I put my fist through walls, through doors. I've punched cars, dented them. I'm getting emotional. I've broken, back in the day when we had telephone, handsets, I broke that in 2. I've broken my glasses so many times. Thank goodness for contacts. And in starting this company 10 years ago and doing this trauma work, right, looking at the inner child, the inner voice, and working with that, and then through your work of learning resonant language, it's very uncomfortable for me when I find myself in a transactional conversation where I only used to be in a transactional conversation. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
In fact, not only did I only know that, I only knew 2 different feelings: rage, not rage. That's all I knew.
And just to come back to this, protection.
Yeah.
Just to acknowledge I'm proud of that. Like, thank God you had that, because otherwise you would have been destroyed.
For sure. Yeah. So I think we didn't cover, thank you for listening to my story.
I loved your story.
Disorganized attachment. I think we didn't talk about the disorganized attachment and how that...
Of grief.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's turn to taking a quick look at disorganization and grief. We know that disorganization makes things unpredictable. So part of disorganized grief is the breakthrough grief, where you're functioning. Somebody says something, it comes out of left field, and all of a sudden you can't contain yourself. You have to go to the restroom and wait until the tears pass. And you're sitting in the restroom, you've got the stall closed, and you've got tears running down. It's making your clothes wet, and you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Why have I suddenly fallen into the pit of despair? That is disorganized grief. It comes directly from trauma. And another way to have disorganized grief is to have no grief at all. And instead of...
that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. So to be like a robot or to be cold.
Especially if someone's having emotion? No.
Or someone's having emotion, or the world is not as you wish it were.
That's helpful. Okay, yeah.
So, for example, parents who go into the silent treatment when their child is not as they wish their child were, or their spouse is not as they wish their spouse were, that's disorganized grief.
Yeah.
I will not feel it. I will take a personal stand against the world not being as I wish it were.
But then this is just a cycle of then I don't get to be seen, I don't get to be heard, I don't get to be known, and then I fall back into grief, and then there's even more isolation,
and then
there's
you're
trauma.
passing disorganization onto your children, and you're passing trauma onto your spouse or partner.
So I had an epiphany about 20 minutes ago in our conversation when you started to kind of go through the different grief attachment pieces. Resonant language is what repairs heartbreak.
It does. It's true. Resonant language repairs heartbreak, and knowing about trauma repairs heartbreak.
Knowing about someone's trauma, knowing about one's trauma, or knowing how to work with trauma?
Knowing how to work with trauma. Knowing that trauma is, in essence, having a part of us caught in time that doesn't move forward. I often think of this as, like, you know how you can look at a river and you can see a dead tree partly up out of the water? They call them snags coming up out of the water. And you see the way the water current, you can kind of see the ripples going behind the snag. And that, I think, is what it's like to be caught with trauma. Like, a part of our attention remains, we're supposed to be way down the river, but a part of our trauma remains on the snag.
It's that thread that's been caught somewhere, and now it's unraveling the sweater, and it just continues to unravel the sweater as you continue.
Yeah, you keep going, and you have less and less life energy.
Yep.
With heartbreak in particular, you have less life energy as you travel, and you've left behind a part of yourself in that moment of betrayal or loss or death or divorce or job separation or
this is all about
loss of a friend.
Self-heartbreak.
Yes.
Betrayal is self-heartbreak.
Betrayal is, very interestingly, betrayal is kind of a corollary of hate. And when we look at hate in the brain, it's exactly like love. It just takes the betrayal curve. It's like, it's almost identical. Hate is almost identical to love in the human brain. It just takes a curve to the amygdala to acknowledge the betrayal that's turned the love into hate.
So you said you wanted to come to overwhelm.
I do, because what's so interesting about overwhelm is that it's a sign that our disgust circuit is out of whack.
Oh my God, what? Come on, Sarah. All these curveballs. That makes so much sense.
Yes, exactly. Overwhelm is the inability to have an internal no that becomes an external no that changes our experience of being overstuffed. So we can talk about attachment and disgust in the workplace.
Let's do that.
If you'd like.
Yes, I think that it's absolutely necessary. No, I was going to make a joke that was sarcastic, which is in the play circuit, which is basically the yellow triggered zone of the play circuit when you're being sarcastic. Anyway, if you want to learn more, come to Understanding Humans at Work. But disgust is about boundaries.
And I want to remind everybody that I added disgust to Panksepp's systems, Panksepp's circuits.
Right. And we did some research. What we found with that particular circuit is that disgust actually secretes serotonin. So it's how
interesting.
Right? We have that in the slide.
In the slide, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we have healthy disgust, and we have secure attachment, then our disgust is working well. In other words, our disgust is letting us know what really works for us and what doesn't, what is too much and and where are our edges? Where do we need to stop? What are our boundaries? Where do we, how much overtime are we willing to work that works for our body?
Mm-hmm.
How much
are we willing to put on our plate?
Yeah, how much are we willing to put on our plate? Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Are we delegating?
Are we delegating? Yes, indeed. So the more that we have a healthy attachment in our disgust circuit, the more choice we have, and the more happiness we have, and the more protection we have, and the more sense of autonomy we have.
Yeah.
Now, as we start to come off of secure attachment, then we begin to move towards avoidance. The move toward avoidance with disgust is terrifying because as we move away from the self and we stop having a self, we move into society's ideas about disgust.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Is it contempt?
It's genocide. Contempt is on the seeking circuit and it's predatory aggression, and we have not talked about that yet.
That's sorry. I'm just processing because I'm actually feeling disgusted.
Yeah.
My whole stomach is really upset right now. Please continue.
So there are word categories in human language that are meant to be used to help to keep us safe. But dictators and people who are on the far right use these words to take over our abandoned disgust circuit. When we move into avoidance, we're leaving our bodies behind, we're leaving our own boundaries behind, and we become an empty husk waiting to be filled by society's disgust. So there's all kinds of manifestations of this, including systemic racism, including genocide, including being opposed to migration, including believing that the Hungarian nation should be made up of white people and that it should be a felony to help Syrian refugees.
When there is a when gun violence is present in a mass shooting at schools, is that avoidant disgust? Or does that go back to the seeking avoidant?
With seeking, you have predatory aggression, which we haven't spoken about.
Yeah, no, right.
And predatory aggression is the hunting circuit. So people killing other people in such a situation,
I see,
is a disorganized manifestation of predatory aggression.
Is predatory aggression the technical term for hatred?
No.
Okay.
Hatred would come closer to rage.
Okay.
Predatory aggression is cruelty, bullying. Almost every manifestation of predatory aggression is disorganized in human society because we don't hunt much for meat anymore.
I don't know. I need the mind blown emoji at this moment.
So predatory aggression can be stimulated by this movement into disgust. They are linked.
Of course.
So you mentioned a school shooting. Many of the school shootings are coming from childhood trauma.
For sure, yeah.
But many of for example, mosque shootings, those are coming from mobilized, disorganized disgust mixed with predatory aggression.
Oh, wow.
Because then you have a targeted group that's been targeted as all of those words that we use for animals that we don't want to be around. For example, vermin or something like that. Those are words that politicians use to mobilize disgust against entire swaths of people.
Is this science taught in the political arena on how to speak?
this is modeled by people who are on the far right. And people write books about it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do research about the way in which the use of this speech, mm-hmm. which is so common on a news network like Fox News Network, mm-hmm. that it actually transforms the human brain, making a more intense link to the avoidant disgust that then results in violence and all kinds of very terrifying results.
Yeah. I was about to share something about my mother, and then I realized the potential of defamation, so I will not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll just keep going.
Okay. So, it's scary.
That is a term that I would not be using. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
It is. So I want to just take us back to something we said in the first episode very early on about sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me.
Right, right.
I'll just pause there because I think that's all I need to say.
Yeah, no kidding.
So we have avoidant disgust. Uh-huh. So now we go over to the
ambivalent.
Yep.
So as we move into the ambivalence again, there's this effort to this ineffectual effort to join for stability.
Right. Yes.
So this then comes to the to the negative side of belonging.
This is the in-out group.
Yes,
this is the
exactly.
Bullying.
Exactly.
This is so. Where do where's all the legislation against trans and the LGBT community in the last 18 months? Where does that fall?
That falls completely in the area of and see, this is where there's this sort of another level of horrifying, which is also a word linked to the disgust circuit. Mm-hmm. Another level of horrifying dysfunction with in-group, out-group. As we come over into, as disgust is mobilized mm-hmm. against swaths of people, mm-hmm. then there's this weird thing that's happening with oxytocin.
Okay.
Where oxytocin is no longer a good thing, it's a bad thing.
Totally.
Because it creates the in-groups.
Yep.
And whenever you have in-groups, you necessarily have to have out-groups. Right. So it's a kind of a double whammy that can happen with disgust.
I want to get to disorganized attachment and disgust.
And anytime it results in harm, then we're moving into disorganization.
So give me an example of harm.
Genocide.
Yeah. Okay. Or what about when the Florida situation with going into the gay club and shooting 50 people?
Terrifying. Yeah. Same thing. It's genocide.
Yeah. Genocide. Okay. I just want to say that first of all, I want to throw up constantly, like for the last 20 minutes of this conversation, and that brings me to my stomach is really upset. Where is I lost my train of thought.
Do you need any acknowledgement?
Yeah.
Of horror at what humans are capable of doing with one another? Does it just take you out with grief and and love for all the trans and lesbian and gay and intersex and everybody, then non-binary, everybody, just loving all the people.
All the people.
And wanting them to be safe.
Yeah. I mean, it really brings a whole new light on this concept of inclusion.
Yeah.
Right?
How life, not even life-saving, not even life-serving, but life-essential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I'm staining my shirt now for my tears. This has been phenomenal. This conversation has been insightful, eye-opening, turbulent, and just incredibly poignant. I want to just kind of rewind us a little bit to maybe about 20. I want to rewind us a little bit in the conversation to when we were talking about in-out group, bullying, genocide, those kinds of things, and kind of spotlight what we're going to talk about in our next conversation, which is about your book with Roxy Manning. What's the title of the book?
The Anti-Racist Heart, a handbook for self-compassion.
That's incredible. I'm so excited to dive on into that one. Talk to you soon, Sarah.
Thank you, Rajkumari.